Rain pours mercilessly as sheriff's deputies carry furniture to the curb. A woman in scrubs clutches paperwork in trembling hands, her face a mask of desperation. "Please, just one more week. I get paid on Friday." The officer avoids eye contact. "Ma'am, we have our orders." In a car parked across the street, the woman breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably until her teenage daughter awkwardly touches her shoulder. She quickly wipes her tears, meeting her children's frightened eyes in the rearview mirror. "This isn't over. We will have a home again." Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. Sarah Connors had always been the one people counted on. A dedicated nurse at Memorial Hospital, she'd spent 12 years healing others while raising her two children, 14-year-old Mia and 9-year-old Tyler, largely on her own. When her ex-husband stopped paying child support 8 months ago, Sarah picked up extra shifts. When the hospital cut hours during budget restructuring, she found weekend work at a nursing home. When Tyler needed braces, she sold her grandmother's silver to cover the deposit. But the mortgage on their modest 3-bedroom home in Oak Ridge Estates couldn't wait. Not after 3 missed payments. Not with Meridian Bank demanding immediate payment. Not with foreclosure proceedings already in motion. Sarah had done everything right, worked endless hours, cut every possible expense, even applied for assistance programs. But in a courtroom on a Tuesday morning in April, none of that mattered. The law was clear, the judge explained. The bank had the right to reclaim their property. And just like that, Sarah Connors, the woman who had saved countless lives in the ER, couldn't save the one thing her children needed most, their home. The morning of Sarah Connors' court hearing began like most others, in exhausted darkness. Her alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m. after her late shift at Memorial. 3 hours of fitful sleep would have to be enough. She showered quickly, the water never quite reaching hot, and put on the navy pantsuit she'd bought secondhand for occasions exactly like this one. In the kitchen, she prepared lunches, signed permission slips, and set out cereal for when the kids woke up. A reminder note on the fridge: "Mom at court, Grandma picks up after school." She paused at Tyler's bedroom door, watching him sleep peacefully, blissfully unaware of what today might mean for their family. The courthouse was an imposing limestone building, its steps already crowded at 8:30 a.m. Inside, Sarah clutched a folder containing everything she thought might help: pay stubs, a letter from her supervisor promising more hours, a payment plan she'd worked out showing how she could catch up if given just 2 more months. Docket number 47,823, Meridian Bank versus Connors, the clerk announced. Sarah approached the plaintiff's table alone. She couldn't afford an attorney, not after exhausting her savings on the mortgage payments she had managed to make. Across the aisle sat Victor Harmon, Meridian Bank's representative. His tailored suit and leather portfolio exuded confidence. He barely glanced at Sarah. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I'm not disputing that I've fallen behind. I'm a nurse and a single mother of 2. My ex-husband stopped paying child support, and I've been working double shifts to catch up." She slid forward her folder of documents. "I have a payment plan here showing how I can become current within 60 days. The hospital is giving me additional hours and—" "Ms. Connors," Judge Williams interrupted, not unkindly, "I understand your situation is difficult, but the law is quite specific regarding mortgage contracts. Has the bank offered you any modification options?" "They said I don't qualify because my income is too inconsistent." Victor Harmon finally spoke, his voice measured and professional. "Your Honor, Meridian Bank has followed all required protocols. Ms. Connors was given multiple notices and opportunities to resolve this matter. The property is now 3 months delinquent, meeting state requirements for foreclosure proceedings." The judge reviewed the documents, his expression giving away nothing. "I see here you've already been granted 1 extension, Ms. Connors." "Yes, Your Honor. I used my tax refund to catch up then, but my son needed emergency dental work the following month. And then, I understand." The judge sighed, removing his glasses. "Unfortunately, the court must rule in accordance with state statutes. The plaintiff has met the legal burden for foreclosure. The property will revert to Meridian Bank effective immediately, with standard 30-day vacancy requirements." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. 30 days. 30 days to find a new home with no savings, poor credit, and 2 children depending on her. "Your Honor, please." Sarah's voice cracked. "My children are in school. My son has special needs services there. If we move—" "I'm sorry, Ms. Connors. My ruling stands." As Sarah gathered her useless paperwork, Victor Harmon brushed past her. "It's just business," he murmured. "Nothing personal." The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of frantic searching. Every affordable apartment wanted first and last month's rent plus deposit, money Sarah simply didn't have. Extended stay motels were beyond her budget. Friends offered couches for a few nights, but not indefinitely, not for 3 people. Sarah sold furniture, electronics, anything that wouldn't fit in their car or the small storage unit she rented with borrowed money from her mother. Each item carried memories. The dining table where Tyler had completed his first-grade projects, the bookshelf Mia had helped paint when they moved in 5 years ago. The children reacted differently to the crisis. Mia became withdrawn, spending more time on her phone, refusing to pack until the last possible moment. Tyler asked the same questions repeatedly, unable to process why they couldn't stay in the only home he clearly remembered. "But why can't we pay them later, Mom? You always say we pay people what we owe them." How could she explain predatory lending practices to a 9-year-old? How could she tell him that sometimes the system was designed to fail people like them? On their last night in the house, Sarah walked through each empty room. Patches of brighter paint marked where pictures had hung. Growth measurements on the kitchen doorframe documented years of childhood. She ran her fingers along the walls, remembering the weekend they had painted together. Pizza boxes scattered across newspaper-covered floors. Morning arrived with dark clouds gathering. Sarah had hoped to be gone before any officials arrived, but loading their remaining possessions took longer than expected. Tyler couldn't find his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Mia argued about leaving her desk behind. Then came the knock. 2 sheriff's deputies, apologetic but firm. A bank representative, not Victor Harmon, but someone equally detached, with paperwork requiring signatures. "We need to speed this up," one deputy said, glancing at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming in." The first raindrops fell as they carried out the last boxes. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Mrs. Abernathy from next door hurried over with garbage bags to cover what wouldn't fit in the car. Mr. Patel from across the street helped secure Tyler's bicycle to the roof rack. But most just watched, perhaps relieved it wasn't them this time, perhaps wondering if they might be next. The heavens opened fully as they pulled away from the curb. Tyler pressed his face against the rear window, watching their home disappear behind a curtain of rain. Mia stared stonily at her phone, though Sarah noticed it wasn't even turned on. They made it 3 blocks before Sarah had to pull over, her vision blurred by tears. She gripped the steering wheel as sobs racked her body, all the strength she'd maintained for weeks finally collapsing. It was Mia who reached out, her hand awkward but present on her mother's shoulder. The simple gesture both broke and mended something in Sarah. She straightened, wiped her eyes, and looked at her children in the rearview mirror. "This isn't over," she promised, her voice finding new resolve. "We will have a home again." The Sunset Motel sat on the edge of Highway 16, its neon sign missing several letters. At $59 per night, it was the cheapest option Sarah could find that wasn't hourly. The single room with 2 double beds would be their home for now. Sarah registered under her maiden name, irrationally afraid the bank might somehow track them. The clerk barely looked up from his television program as he handed over a key attached to a plastic fob. Room 118 smelled of industrial cleaner, barely masking years of cigarette smoke. The carpet was worn to threads in high-traffic areas. The bathroom featured rust stains and missing tiles. But it had a roof, running water, and enough electricity to power the ancient mini-fridge and microwave. "It's just temporary," Sarah assured as she helped the children settle in, like camping. That night, as her children finally slept, Sarah sat on the edge of the bathtub with her laptop, searching job boards for additional work. The hospital was a 2-hour bus ride from the motel, making her shifts even more exhausting. She applied for overnight stocking positions at nearby stores, weekend receptionist work, anything that might help rebuild their savings. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Did you apply for that housing assistance program?" Sarah stared at the message. She had 3 different ones. All had waiting lists measured in years, not months. One had actually laughed when she called to check her status. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened her banking app and calculated how long they could stay at the motel before she'd have to choose between shelter and food. The answer made her stomach clench. 3 weeks. 3 weeks before impossible choices. Sarah closed the bathroom door and turned on the shower to mask the sound as she finally allowed herself to cry again. The next morning, she woke the children before dawn. "We need to leave early to get you to school on time," she explained, helping Tyler find clean socks in their hastily packed bags. "Do we have to go today?" Mia asked. "Everyone will know. Education doesn't stop for hard times," Sarah replied, the phrase her own mother had repeated through difficult periods. "And you don't need to tell anyone where we're staying. It's private." The bus ride to their school district took nearly an hour. Sarah watched the neighborhoods change through the window, from the commercial strips near the motel to increasingly residential areas, finally reaching the middle-class community they'd left behind. Oak Ridge Elementary and Westside Middle School were just 3 blocks apart, allowing Sarah to walk both children to their buildings. "I'll pick you up right here at 3:30, she told them, straightening Tyler's collar. "Wait together, okay?" Mia rolled her eyes. "I'm 14, Mom. I don't need a babysitter. I know you're responsible. That's why I'm counting on you." Sarah squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Just a few hours, then we'll figure out dinner together." As they walked away, Tyler's dinosaur backpack bouncing with each step, Mia's shoulders hunched defensively. Sarah felt a physical ache in her chest. They deserved so much better than what she could provide right now. Her own hospital shift started at noon, leaving her 3 hours to visit the housing authority office. The waiting room was already crowded when she arrived, desperate faces above clipboard questionnaires. Sarah recognized the look from her own mirror. When her number was finally called, the caseworker seemed genuinely sympathetic but ultimately helpless. Emergency housing assistance requires an actual eviction notice, not a foreclosure, she explained. Different funding streams, different requirements. But we were evicted, Sarah insisted. There were sheriff's deputies. That's a bank repossession, technically different. The caseworker lowered her voice. The system isn't designed for people in your situation. Most assistance programs assume foreclosures happen to homeowners with equity or other resources. Sarah leaned forward. What about my children? There must be something. Family shelters have a 6-week waiting list right now. The caseworker slid across a pamphlet. This has information about food banks and community meals. Some churches offer temporary assistance with hotel vouchers. Sarah stared at the glossy trifold. The help it offered was for people in genuine crisis, not a nurse with a steady paycheck who should, theoretically, be able to support her family. The gap between should and could had never felt so vast. Her shift at Memorial Hospital passed in the exhausted routine she'd perfected over years. Temperature checks, medication distribution, chart updates, comforting words to frighten patients. Her body performed these tasks automatically while her mind raced with calculations and contingency plans. During her lunch break, she called the school to check on Tyler. The counselor reported he seemed quiet but participated in class. Small victories. As her shift ended, Sarah's supervisor called her into the office. Connor, we need to discuss your schedule. Barbara had been Sarah's mentor for years, her directness always tempered with fairness. You requested more hours, but you look like you're running on fumes. I'm fine, Sarah insisted. Just adjusting to a new living situation. Barbara's expression softened. If you need to talk, what I need is more work, Sarah interrupted, then immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry, it's been a difficult week, but I can handle additional shifts, truly. The conversation ended with a compromise. 3 extra shifts over the next 2 weeks, with Barbara's promise to reevaluate after that. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The bus ride back to the children's schools took longer than expected due to traffic. Sarah found them waiting on the steps, Tyler clutching his backpack to his chest, Mia pacing irritably. Sorry I'm late, Sarah called, hurrying toward them. The bus was. Save it, Mia cut her off. Tyler had a meltdown because you weren't here on time. Everyone saw. Sarah knelt before her son, whose face showed traces of dried tears. I'm here now, buddy. I promise I won't be late again. Trevor says we're homeless, Tyler whispered. Are we homeless, Mom? The question pierced Sarah's heart. No, honey, we have a place to stay. It's just different right now. As they walked to the bus stop, Sarah noticed Tyler wincing slightly. Does something hurt? He shook his head quickly, too quickly. Sarah gently turned him to face her. Tyler Robert Connors, what's wrong? Reluctantly, he lifted his shirt to reveal a bruise forming on his side. Who did this? Sarah demanded, panic and fury rising simultaneously. Trevor and his friends, Mia answered when Tyler wouldn't. They were teasing him about living in a car, and when he said we didn't, they pushed him against the fence. Sarah embraced her son, mind racing between protective rage and practical necessities. She couldn't march into the principal's office. Not now, not when they were technically outside the school district, not when drawing attention might create new problems. We'll talk to your teacher tomorrow, she promised. And Mia's right. We're not homeless. We have each other, and that's what makes a home. The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. That night, after microwave macaroni and cheese eaten from paper bowls, after Tyler finally fell asleep watching cartoons on Sarah's phone, Mia cornered her mother in the cramped bathroom. Stop lying to him, she hissed. Stop pretending everything's fine. I'm not pretending, Sarah whispered back. I'm trying to protect you both while I figure this out. Figure what out? How we live in this gross motel forever. How I can't invite friends over or tell anyone where we are. How Tyler gets beaten up because we don't have a real house. Each question landed like a physical blow. Sarah reached for her daughter, but Mia stepped back. You promised we'd never end up like this, Mia continued, tears finally breaking through her anger. You promised after Dad left that we'd be okay. And we will be, Sarah insisted, pulling Mia into an embrace despite her resistance. This is temporary, a setback, not an ending. Eventually, Mia's rigid posture softened as she cried against her mother's shoulder. When she finally pulled away, her expression had changed from fury to something worse, resignation. Whatever, Mom, just don't make promises you can't keep anymore. Days stretched into weeks at the Sunset Motel. Sarah established new routines, early mornings at the laundromat before school, dinner from the grocery store deli counter or dollar menu, Homework spread across beds because there was no table. She stretched their budget by bargaining with the motel manager for a weekly rate, reducing their cost to $350, still exorbitant for what they received, but better than before. She canceled their cell phone plan, keeping only her phone active for emergencies and job contacts. Tyler's teacher had addressed the bullying situation, but the damage was done. He became more withdrawn, jumping at sudden noises, having nightmares that woke all three of them in their shared space. Their conversation after the incident haunted Sarah. "Why can't we go home, Mom? I'll be good. This isn't about you being good or bad, sweetheart. The bank took our house because of grown-up money problems. Can't you fight the bank? You always tell me to stand up to bullies." Sarah had no answer that wouldn't further complicate his understanding of justice. 3 weeks into their stay, Sarah was working a 12-hour weekend shift when a familiar name appeared on her patient roster: Harmon, Elizabeth. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet the date of birth and insurance information confirmed this was indeed related to Victor Harmon from Meridian Bank. When Sarah entered examination room 3, she found a well-dressed woman in her early 40s with a minor laceration on her forehead. "Mrs. Harmon, I'm Sarah, your nurse today. Says here you were in a minor accident?" "Fender bender," Elizabeth Harmon explained, touching her injury gingerly. "Airbag deployed. The doctor already said I don't have a concussion, but they want to clean and dress this cut." Sarah worked with professional efficiency, cleaning the wound while making appropriate small talk. Nothing in her demeanor betrayed the hurricane of emotions beneath her calm exterior. "You have wonderful hands," Elizabeth commented. "Very gentle. Thank you. I've been a nurse for 12 years. It shows. My husband always says you can tell true professionals by how they handle pressure." Elizabeth smiled. "He works in banking, high stress, constant deadlines." Sarah carefully applied butterfly closures to the laceration. "Banking must be interesting work. Victor finds it fulfilling. He's with Meridian. Just saved our whole neighborhood, actually. There was this development company trying to convert it to low-income housing. Can you imagine? Our property values would have plummeted." Sarah's hands faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Sounds like he's quite the community hero. He says it's just business, but I know he cares deeply about preserving neighborhood character." After Mrs. Harmon was discharged, Sarah excused herself to the staff bathroom. Once inside, she locked the door and pressed her forehead against the cool tile wall, struggling to control her breathing. The connection was undeniable. Victor Harmon wasn't just a bank representative following procedure. He was actively working to reshape neighborhoods, her neighborhood, for profit. A wave of fury washed over her. Sarah slammed her fist against the wall, pain shooting through her knuckles. The physical sensation provided momentary relief from the emotional tornado. When she examined her hand, the skin was split across 2 knuckles. Nothing broken, but she'd need to bandage it before returning to work. As she wrapped gauze around her hand, a new emotion emerged alongside the anger: determination. That evening, Sarah found herself in the community room of First Presbyterian Church, attending a support group for displaced homeowners. She hadn't planned to go, had even scoffed at the flyer posted at the housing assistant's office. What good would talking do? They needed action, not comfort. But Tyler was spending the night at her mother's apartment, and Mia was at a rare sleepover with a friend who hadn't yet abandoned her. The evening stretched emptily ahead, and Sarah couldn't face the motel room alone. The meeting was already underway when she slipped into a metal folding chair at the back of the room. A balding man in his 50s was speaking, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to public speaking. "The banks count on our shame," he was saying. "They count on us believing we failed, rather than recognizing that the system is designed for us to fail." Sarah studied him as he continued. His clothes were clean but worn, his gestures passionate without being theatrical. He spoke like someone who understood both the legal complexities and the human cost of housing insecurity. After the formal meeting ended, Sarah approached him as he gathered papers from a small table. "You seem to know a lot about foreclosure law," she observed. He looked up, offering a tired smile. "Raymond Beck, former real estate attorney." "Former? Lost my license fighting the wrong battles." He extended his hand. "And you are?" "Sarah Connors, nurse, recently foreclosed upon by Meridian Bank." Raymond's expression sharpened. "Meridian, you say? Whereabouts?" "Oak Ridge Estates." He nodded slowly. "You're the 4th person from that neighborhood I've met this month. Interesting pattern." Sarah described her situation briefly: the missed payments, the court hearing, the eviction, and finally, her encounter with Elizabeth Harmon. "Her husband works for the bank that took your house, and he's also involved with development?" Raymond clarified, jotting notes on a legal pad. "That's potentially significant." "Why?" "It's not illegal to be married to a developer." "No, but there are strict regulations about how banks can dispose of foreclosed properties, especially when there might be conflicts of interest." Raymond handed her his card. "I can't practice law anymore. but I can help you understand what documents to request and how to interpret them. Sarah stared at the card, then handed it back. I appreciate the offer, but I need to focus on keeping my job and finding stable housing for my kids. I don't have time for a crusade. With respect, Ms. Connors, understanding what happened might be directly connected to finding new housing. If there are improprieties in how these foreclosures are being handled, you could have legal recourse. Legal recourse takes time and money. I have neither. Raymond nodded. I understand, but if you change your mind, my number's on the board over there. I volunteer here Tuesday evenings. As Sarah turned to leave, he added, the shame isn't yours to carry, Sarah. Remember that. That night, alone in the motel room, Sarah couldn't sleep. Raymond's words echoed in her mind as she scrolled through rental listings she couldn't afford. The shame isn't yours to carry. But if not hers, whose? The bank was just following the contract she had signed. Her ex-husband had abandoned his responsibilities. True, but she was the one who had fallen behind on payments. Almost unconsciously, she found herself typing Meridian Bank Foreclosures Oak Ridge into her phone's search engine. The results included several news articles about neighborhood revitalization and property value increases. One headline caught her attention. Harmon Development Group announces luxury community plans for Oak Ridge. The article, dated just 2 weeks after her eviction, detailed plans for the Estates at Oak Ridge, a gated community featuring homes starting at $750,000, with construction beginning once the neighborhood transition is complete. Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. The pieces were starting to align in a pattern too neat for coincidence. The next morning, she called Raymond Beck. Raymond Beck's office was actually the back room of a print shop owned by his brother-in-law. Cardboard boxes served as impromptu filing cabinets, and the desk appeared to be an old door resting on sawhorses. Despite these makeshift accommodations, the walls displayed framed law degrees from prestigious universities. Sorry about the setup, Raymond said, clearing stacks of paper from a folding chair. After my disbarment, conventional office space became financially prohibitive. What happened? Sarah asked, sitting carefully. If you don't mind me asking, Raymond sighed, rubbing his beard. I represented several homeowners against United Mortgage during the 2008 crisis. We were winning, proving they had violated notification requirements. Then suddenly, my clients started withdrawing their cases one by one. He shuffled papers on his makeshift desk. I kept pushing, even when it was clear someone had gotten to my clients. The bank filed ethics complaints, claiming I was pursuing frivolous litigation. The Bar Association agreed. That's horrible. That's business. Raymond's smile held no humor. Now, tell me more about your situation with Meridian and this Harmon Development connection. Sarah described everything, the foreclosure process, her encounter with Mrs. Harmon, and the news article about the luxury development. I need to know if you're serious about pursuing this, Raymond said after listening. Not just for yourself, but potentially for others in your neighborhood. It will take time, persistence, and emotional energy you might not feel you have right now. Sarah thought of Tyler's bruises, Mia's resignation, the growth marks on the kitchen door frame they'd never see again. I don't have much left to lose, she replied, and I need my children to see that sometimes you have to fight, even when it seems impossible. Raymond nodded. First step, we need to examine your foreclosure documents and loan history. Then we'll request public records about property transfers in your neighborhood. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah spent every free moment, precious little with her work schedule, reviewing documents with Raymond. They spread papers across the print shop's work table after hours, creating timelines and connection maps. What emerged was disturbing. Sarah's mortgage had been sold multiple times between financial institutions, making it almost impossible to track who actually owned her loan when foreclosure proceedings began. Her paperwork contained discrepancies in dates and amounts that hadn't been questioned during the expedited court hearing. This is called robo-signing, Raymond explained, pointing to nearly identical signatures on different documents. During the foreclosure crisis, banks employed people to sign thousands of documents daily without proper review. It's illegal, but proving it requires significant resources. Through public records requests, they discovered that Meridian Bank had acquired dozens of mortgages in Oak Ridge estates over the past year, all in specific sections of the neighborhood. They're cherry-picking, Raymond muttered, circling properties on a neighborhood map, creating a contiguous block of foreclosures in the most desirable section. The pattern became clearer when they overlaid property transfers from Meridian Bank to Harmon Development Group. Properties were changing hands remarkably quickly after foreclosure, sometimes within days rather than the usual months. This suggests prior arrangement, Raymond said. Normally, banks list foreclosed properties on the open market or at auction. This looks like a predetermined transfer strategy. Sarah noticed another pattern. All these foreclosures, they're all single-parent households, elderly residents, or families with financial hardships documented in public records like bankruptcy filings. Targeting vulnerable homeowners, Raymond nodded grimly. Easier to pressure, less likely to have resources to fight back. Sarah felt sick. So this wasn't just bad luck or my own failure. They were waiting for people like me to stumble. Precisely. Their next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah ran into her former neighbor, Harold Jenkins, at the grocery store. Unlike Sarah, Harold still lived in his Oak Ridge home. Bank offered me a special refinancing program, he explained when Sarah asked how he'd managed. Lower interest, extended term. Said I was a valued community member. Did everyone get this offer? Sarah asked. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Don't think so. Mr. Patel asked me about it, said he was denied when he applied. Sarah invited Harold to meet with Raymond, who carefully documented the terms of this special program. They compared Harold's financial situation with Sarah's. His income was lower, his payment history worse. The only significant differences: Harold was an older white man who lived alone, while Sarah was a younger woman with children. Discrimination, Raymond stated flatly. They're choosing who stays and who goes based on demographic profiles that suit their development vision. The final piece clicked into place when they examined Sarah's foreclosure paperwork more carefully. The notary stamps on several critical documents differed from state requirements, and one signature appeared to be significantly different from Sarah's own. This isn't my signature, Sarah realized, comparing it to her driver's license. I never signed this document. Raymond's expression was simultaneously troubled and triumphant. Forgery. Now we have something concrete. That evening, Sarah returned to the motel emotionally drained but internally fired up. Weeks of investigation had confirmed what she'd initially suspected. Her family hadn't simply fallen victim to unfortunate circumstances. They had been targeted as part of a systematic effort to reshape her neighborhood. The knowledge was both devastating and empowering. She hadn't failed her children through personal shortcomings. A predatory system had identified her vulnerability and exploited it for profit. As she opened the motel room door, the contrast between this realization and her current reality hit hard. Tyler was curled on one bed with his dinosaur, watching cartoons on her mother's borrowed tablet. Mia sat cross-legged on the other bed, attempting to complete homework assignments in the inadequate light. "Mom?" Tyler launched himself at her. "We waited forever." Sarah checked her watch, alarmed to find it was nearly 8 p.m. She'd lost track of time at Raymond's office. "I'm so sorry, buddy." Work ran long. The half-truth tasted bitter. Mia didn't look up from her textbook. "Grandma brought dinner. Yours is in the fridge. Thank you for taking care of things," Sarah said, setting down her bag. "How was school today?" Tyler launched into a detailed account of recess activities while Sarah heated her meal in the microwave. Mia remained conspicuously silent. After Tyler was asleep, Sarah sat beside her daughter. "I know I've been distracted lately," she began. "Distracted?" Mia finally looked up, her expression unnervingly adult. "You're never here anymore. When you are, you're on the phone or looking at papers. It's like we lost our house, and now we're losing you too." The accusation stung because it contained truth. Sarah had been so focused on understanding what had happened, she'd neglected to fully address what was happening now, her children continuing to suffer in this limbo. "You're right," Sarah admitted. "I've been trying to figure out why we lost our home, and I think I've found some answers. But that doesn't excuse neglecting you and Tyler." "What difference does why make?" Mia asked. "We still don't have a home. It makes a difference because what happened to us wasn't fair or legal, and we might be able to do something about it, not just for us, but for other families too." Sarah explained in simplified terms what she and Raymond had discovered. As she spoke, she noticed Mia's expression shifting from resentment to interest. "So they basically stole our house? That's illegal, right?" "It's complicated, but yes, parts of what they did violated the law. Then we should totally fight them," Mia declared with teenage certainty. "Make them pay." Sarah smiled at her daughter's sudden enthusiasm. "It's not that simple. Legal battles take time and resources." "So what? You always tell us to stand up to bullies." Mia pulled out her school notebook and flipped to a blank page. "I've been researching foreclosures for my social studies project. Did you know banks foreclosed on thousands of homes with paperwork errors during the housing crisis?" Sarah stared at her daughter's notes, detailed, organized research that mirrored her own investigations with Raymond. All this time, while Sarah thought Mia was withdrawing, she'd been trying to understand their situation in her own way. That night, Sarah nearly abandoned the entire investigation. After Mia fell asleep, she drafted an email to Raymond explaining that she needed to focus exclusively on her family's immediate needs. Her finger hovered over the send button for several minutes. Then she noticed Mia's notebook on the nightstand, open to a page titled, "How Banks Take Homes Unfairly." Below it, in Mia's careful handwriting, "Mom will fix this. She always does." Sarah deleted the draft. Her children needed stability, yes, but they also needed to see that justice was worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The next day, Sarah called Raymond with a new determination. "I'm still in, but I need to balance this fight with being present for my kids. Can we adjust our schedule?" Raymond agreed immediately. "Family comes first, always. We'll work around your schedule." Their investigation entered a new phase. With Sarah's limited availability, Raymond took on more of the document review while Sarah focused on connecting with other affected homeowners. Through property records and Raymond's support group contacts, Sarah identified 27 families from Oak Ridge Estates who had lost their homes to Meridian Bank in the past year. She began calling them one by one, carefully explaining what they'd discovered and asking about their experiences. Patterns emerged quickly. Nearly all reported similar experiences. Minor payment delays met with immediate foreclosure proceedings rather than modification offers, court hearings scheduled at inconvenient times, paperwork discrepancies they hadn't noticed until it was too late. "We need to bring these families together," Raymond suggested. "There's power in numbers, especially when seeking media attention." Sarah arranged a meeting at First Presbyterian's community room for the following Sunday afternoon. She created simple flyers, which Mia helped distribute to former neighbors they could locate. The day of the meeting arrived with Sarah nervous but prepared. She'd created a basic presentation outlining their findings, with Raymond available to answer legal questions. Tyler insisted on attending, proud to help set up chairs with his grandmother, who had become an enthusiastic supporter of Sarah's efforts. As the meeting time approached, Sarah watched anxiously as people trickled in. 5 families, 8, 12. By the scheduled start time, 23 of the 27 families were represented, filling the community room to capacity. Sarah stood to begin her presentation, suddenly overwhelmed by the responsibility. These people had lost their homes, just like her. They were struggling with similar hardships. What if this effort led nowhere? What if she was giving them false hope? As she hesitated, Tyler began coughing in the back row, the persistent cough he'd developed since moving to the mold-infested motel. The sound triggered Sarah's deepest fear, that her pursuit of justice was coming at the cost of her son's health. Her carefully prepared opening dissolved in her mind. I'm not sure." From the second row, a woman stood up, Maria Rodriguez, a single mother of 3 whose home had been one of the first foreclosed upon. "Let me say something," Maria began. 6 months ago, I thought losing my home was my fault. I believed I had failed my children. I carried that shame every day." She moved to stand beside Sarah. "Then Ms. Connors called me, asked questions no one had asked before. She showed me documents proving the bank had broken rules, violated my rights. For the first time, I felt angry instead of ashamed." Maria turned to address the room. "We are not here because we failed. We are here because a system failed us, deliberately. And now, together, we can do something about it." The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude as Maria squeezed her hand in solidarity. She wasn't alone in this fight. None of them were. With renewed confidence, Sarah began her presentation. She explained the pattern of targeted foreclosures, the connection to Harmon Development Group, and the evidence of paperwork irregularities they'd discovered. "We're calling ourselves the Homeowners Justice Alliance," Sarah concluded. "Together, we can seek accountability from Meridian Bank and potentially reclaim our homes or receive appropriate compensation." The discussion that followed was passionate and productive. Families shared additional evidence of misconduct. Some brought foreclosure documents showing the same irregularities Raymond had identified in Sarah's paperwork. Others described interactions with bank representatives who had discouraged loan modifications or steered them away from assistance programs. By meeting's end, all 23 families had officially joined the alliance, contributing what they could to a community fund for legal expenses. It wasn't much. Most were still struggling with basic necessities, but it represented a powerful commitment. As people filed out, exchanging contact information and planning further actions, Raymond approached Sarah. "That was impressive," he said. "You're a natural organizer." "I just connected people who needed each other," Sarah replied, watching Tyler help stack chairs. "What's our next step?" "Media attention. We need to make this public." Through a nurse colleague, Sarah was introduced to Michael Henderson, a reporter for the local newspaper who specialized in housing issues. Initially skeptical, Henderson agreed to meet Sarah and Raymond at the print shop to review their evidence. "Interesting," he remarked, examining their documentation, "but not entirely surprising. Banks have been playing fast and loose with foreclosure procedures for years." "This is different," Sarah insisted. "It's not just procedural shortcuts. It's a coordinated strategy to target specific homeowners for the benefit of a development company with direct ties to the bank." Henderson remained non-committal, but agreed to review the materials more thoroughly. A week later, his article appeared in the Sunday edition. "Homeowners allege systematic foreclosure abuse in Oak Ridge." The piece was smaller than they'd hoped, page 3 rather than front page, but it meticulously outlined the alliance's key allegations and included quotes from several affected families. Most importantly, it named both Meridian Bank and Harmon Development Group. "It's a start," Raymond said when they met to discuss the article. "Now we need legal muscle." The alliance had raised enough money to consult with an attorney, but not nearly enough for sustained representation. Raymond suggested approaching Diana Miller, a successful class-action attorney known for taking on corporate interests. "She's selective about her cases," he warned, "and we'll need more than allegations to interest her." Sarah and Raymond prepared exhaustively for their meeting with Diana Miller. They organized their evidence into clear categories, created timelines showing the relationship between foreclosures and property transfers, and compiled testimonials from alliance members. Diana's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, a stark contrast to Raymond's print shop headquarters. Her reception area featured award plaques and newspaper clippings, highlighting major victories against pharmaceutical companies and manufacturers. Sarah felt immediately outclassed in her thrift store blazer and scuffed pumps, but reminded herself that appearances didn't diminish the truth of their case. Diana Miller herself projected confidence and efficiency. In her mid-50s with precisely styled silver hair, she reviewed their materials with minimal commentary, occasionally asking pointed questions about documentation sources and verification methods. After an hour, she closed the final folder and leaned back in her chair. "You've done impressive investigative work," she acknowledged, "particularly considering your resources, but I need to be direct. Cases against financial institutions are extraordinarily difficult. We understand the challenges," Sarah responded, "but 27 families have lost their homes through potentially fraudulent practices. More are at risk. Doesn't that merit action?" "Merit isn't the issue. Wineability is." Diana tapped the folders. "You have concerning patterns and some documentation discrepancies, but you're missing the smoking gun that connects these foreclosures directly to a profit scheme," Raymond intervened. "We believe further discovery would reveal those connections. The timeline between foreclosures and property transfers to Harmon Development alone suggests isn't enough in court," Diana sighed. "I'm sorry, but I don't see a viable case here that justifies the resources required. The bank has millions to fight this. You have community goodwill and limited documentation." Sarah felt the familiar burn of rejection, but refused to accept it this time. "Miller, before you decide, I'd like you to meet some of the families affected." Diana checked her watch. "I have another appointment in 15 minutes. Not today. This Sunday. The Alliance meets weekly at First Presbyterian." Sarah stood, gathering their materials. "See the people behind these documents, then decide if their case deserves representation." To Sarah's surprise, Diana Miller did attend the Sunday meeting. She sat quietly in the back, observing as families shared updates and new members introduced themselves. The Alliance had grown to 35 families now, with more coming forward after the newspaper article. Diana didn't commit to anything that day, but 2 days later, her office called. She would represent the Homeowners Justice Alliance on a contingency basis, with minimal upfront costs. "What changed her mind?" Sarah asked Raymond when he delivered the news. "You did," he replied simply. "You and all those families fighting together. Diana has her pick of cases. She chooses the ones with clients she believes in. With Diana's legal expertise now supporting them, the Alliance's efforts accelerated. Formal document requests were filed. Depositions were scheduled. The local newspaper ran a follow-up article highlighting the class action preparation. Meridian Bank, now forced to acknowledge the situation publicly, issued a statement. Meridian Bank adheres to all applicable laws and regulations regarding mortgage servicing and foreclosure proceedings. We deny any allegations of impropriety and will vigorously defend our reputation and practices. Behind the scenes, however, the bank was clearly concerned. Sarah noticed unmarked cars occasionally parked near the motel. Alliance members reported receiving calls from bank representatives, suddenly offering loan modifications or settlement discussions. Then came the direct approach. Sarah returned to the motel one evening to find Victor Harmon himself waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a luxury sedan. "Miss Connors," he greeted her, as though they were colleagues. "I was hoping we might talk." Sarah's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "I believe our attorneys should handle any communication, Mr. Harmon. This is an informal conversation." He smiled without warmth. "An opportunity to resolve your personal situation expeditiously, separate from these broader allegations." He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. "Meridian Bank is prepared to offer you a generous settlement, new housing allowance, debt forgiveness, and a significant cash payment. In exchange, we ask only for your withdrawal from the Alliance and a standard confidentiality agreement." Sarah stared at the envelope, conscious of Tyler watching from the motel room window. The boy's persistent cough had worsened in recent weeks. The doctor had diagnosed environmental asthma, recommending immediate relocation from the mold-contaminated motel. The envelope in Harmon's hand represented exactly what her family needed most: immediate relief, a new start, a healthy environment for her children. "I'll need to review this with my attorney," she said, accepting the envelope without opening it. "Of course," Harmon straightened his tie, "but I should mention this offer is exclusive to you, given your leadership position. The terms are quite generous now, but will become less so once formal litigation begins." As he walked away, he added casually, "Think about what's best for your children, Miss Connors. Principle makes for cold comfort in difficult times." Inside the motel room, Sarah set the envelope on the dresser, its presence dominating the small space. "What's that?" Mia asked immediately. "A settlement offer from the bank," Sarah answered honestly. "They want me to drop the case." "You're not going to, right?" Mia's eyes widened. "After everything we found out?" Before Sarah could respond, Tyler erupted in another coughing fit. Painful, racking coughs that left him gasping. Sarah helped him use his inhaler, then held him until his breathing calmed. That night, after both children were asleep, Sarah removed the papers from the envelope. The terms were indeed generous, more than generous. A housing allowance sufficient for a decent apartment, complete debt forgiveness for the foreclosed mortgage, and a cash settlement that would cover Tyler's medical needs and provide financial stability for months. All she had to do was walk away, sign the confidentiality agreement, let the other families fight their own battles. Sarah sat staring at the papers until dawn, the weight of her decision crushing. The following day, Sarah called in sick to the hospital for the first time in years. She needed uninterrupted time to think, to weigh her family's immediate needs against the principles she was fighting for. She took Tyler to his pediatrician's appointment while Mia was at school, listening with growing alarm as the doctor explained that his asthma was worsening. "He needs a stable, clean living environment," Dr. Patel emphasized. "Prolonged exposure to mold and dampness is exacerbating his condition. Is there any possibility of relocating soon?" "We're exploring options," Sarah replied vaguely, acutely aware of the settlement papers sitting in her bag. Afterward, she took Tyler for ice cream, a small indulgence that seemed simultaneously frivolous and necessary. As he happily devoured his treat, oblivious to the weight of decisions hanging over them, Sarah's phone rang. It was Barbara from the hospital. "Sarah, I need you to come in. Not for a shift. We need to talk." The serious tone set alarm bells ringing. "Is something wrong? Just come in as soon as you can." Sarah arrived at Memorial Hospital an hour later, Tyler in tow with his dinosaur backpack full of activities. Barbara met them in the administrative wing, her normally warm expression replaced with professional concern. "Tyler, would you mind waiting with Ms. Johnson at the reception desk? She has some cool stickers." When Tyler was settled, Barbara led Sarah to a small conference room where the hospital's HR director and legal counsel waited. "Sarah, we've received a concerning communication," Barbara began carefully. "Meridian Bank has filed a complaint alleging you accessed confidential patient information improperly." "What?" Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "That's completely false." The legal counsel, a severe woman in her 60s, slid a document across the table. "They specifically reference your treatment of Elizabeth Harmon 6 weeks ago, followed by your involvement in legal action against her husband's company. They suggest you used your position to access patient records for personal agenda." Sarah's mind raced to the brief interaction with Mrs. Blank, Harmon. "I treated her for a minor laceration after a car accident. We had a normal nurse-patient conversation. I never accessed any records beyond what was necessary for care." "We believe you," Barbara interjected, "but we need to follow protocol for such allegations. You'll be placed on administrative leave during the investigation." "Paid leave?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "Unpaid, unfortunately, until the matter is resolved." Barbara looked genuinely distressed. "I fought for paid, but it's policy for compliance investigations." The timing couldn't have been more devastating. Without her hospital income, even the cheap motel would become unaffordable within weeks. This was clearly the bank's retaliation for her refusal to immediately accept their settlement. "How long will the investigation take?" Sarah asked, struggling to maintain composure. 2 weeks minimum, the HR director replied. "Potentially longer, if the bank provides additional information requiring verification." Sarah left the meeting in a daze, collecting Tyler from the reception area where he'd accumulated several dinosaur stickers. Her mind calculated rapidly. Current savings, minus motel costs, minus food, minus Tyler's medications. The math was unforgiving. Instead of returning to the motel, Sarah drove to Raymond's print shop. She found him organizing documents for the Alliance's case. "They're playing hardball," he observed after she explained the situation. "Classic intimidation tactic. They're trying to force you to take the settlement by eliminating your alternatives." "It's working," Sarah admitted, watching Tyler color in the corner. "Without my income, we'll be truly homeless within a month, and Tyler needs better housing now. not after a lengthy court battle. Raymond studied her expression. You're considering taking their offer. It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. What kind of mother chooses a legal principle over her son's health? Raymond was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and removed a worn photograph. A young man in graduation robes, smiling proudly beside a younger version of Raymond. My son, Jason, he explained. He was studying to become an environmental lawyer when I was fighting United Mortgage. When things got ugly, when I was facing disbarment, I considered dropping everything to protect our family's stability. What happened? Jason told me something I've never forgotten. He said, Dad, if you compromise on justice because it's inconvenient, you're teaching me that principles have price tags. Raymond's voice thickened. I continued the fight, lost my license, nearly lost our home. Jason had to drop out of law school temporarily to work. I'm sorry, Sarah offered, uncertain where the story was leading. Don't be. Jason eventually finished law school. Today he works for the Environmental Protection Agency, fighting corporate polluters. Raymond smiled sadly. He tells me our difficult years taught him that justice and family aren't opposing choices. They're interconnected. Fighting for broader principles is part of protecting your family's future world. The story resonated deeply with Sarah, but didn't eliminate her practical concerns. I still need income. The Alliance can help temporarily, Raymond suggested. Several members have offered job leads, and, he hesitated, I could use part-time paralegal assistance. It wouldn't be much, but combined with odd jobs, it might bridge the gap. Sarah weighed the options. Working with Raymond would allow her to continue building the case while earning income. It would mean irregular hours and financial instability, but also the chance to see this fight through. I'll need to arrange childcare, she began, already mentally rearranging their lives. Raymond smiled. So you're staying with the Alliance? For now, Sarah qualified, but I reserve the right to prioritize my children's immediate needs if necessary. As you should, Raymond handed her an Alliance folder. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Connors. The next few weeks transformed Sarah's life completely. She worked mornings at Raymond's office, organizing case files and communicating with Alliance members. Afternoons were split between a cashier position at a local pharmacy and occasional home health visits for a private agency that didn't care about Meridian's allegations. Her mother increased her involvement, watching Tyler after school while Mia began babysitting for another Alliance family on weekends. The community they'd built became their safety net, with members helping each other navigate housing insecurity, job searches, and emotional support. The Alliance's case progressed steadily under Diana Miller's guidance. Former Meridian employees provided testimonials about foreclosure practices. Public records revealed more connections between the bank and Harmon Development Group. Local media coverage expanded to include a segment on the evening news. Sarah's role evolved from member to leader. Her nursing background gave her credibility when explaining how stress affected displaced families. Her personal story resonated with journalists. Her organizational skills kept the Alliance functioning despite limited resources. You should consider law school, Raymond remarked one evening as they prepared for a community meeting. You have a natural aptitude for this work. Sarah laughed, exhaustion evident in her voice. At 36, with 2 children and no savings, hardly practical. Jason was 32 when he went back, Raymond countered. There's no expiration date on education. The suggestion seemed absurd given their current circumstances, yet it planted a seed in Sarah's mind. Throughout her nursing career, she'd witnessed how legal and financial systems affected healthcare outcomes. Perhaps there was a way to address those systems more directly. As the case preparation intensified, Sarah found herself absorbing legal knowledge rapidly. Diana assigned her basic research tasks that required learning about precedents and procedures. Raymond taught her how to draft affidavits and prepare witnesses for depositions. Her days became a blur of activity: work, childcare, legal research, Alliance meetings. Sleep was a luxury she could rarely afford, often studying court cases after the children were in bed until exhaustion claimed her in the early morning hours. Despite her busy schedule, Sarah noticed concerning changes in her own behavior. When a car backfired near the motel, she dropped to the ground, momentarily believing she was being evicted again. Seeing sheriff's deputies at the pharmacy triggered panic attacks she had to hide in the employee bathroom. The trauma of losing her home had left invisible scars that time alone wouldn't heal. Her children were showing signs of strain as well. Tyler's academic performance had declined significantly, his teacher reporting difficulty concentrating and emotional outbursts. Mia had become hypervigilant about money, obsessively tracking every expense and questioning necessary purchases. These observations led Sarah to arrange for the Alliance to incorporate counseling services into their weekly meetings. A local therapist volunteered to facilitate support groups for adults and children, creating space for emotional processing alongside the legal fight. During one such session, Sarah finally acknowledged the full impact of their experiences. I thought I was protecting my children by staying strong, never showing how terrified I actually was, she admitted to the group. But I think they sensed it anyway, and it scared them more that I wouldn't acknowledge the fear. This realization prompted Sarah to have more honest conversations with Mia and Tyler about their circumstances. Still age-appropriate, but no longer pretending everything was fine. These discussions revealed that both children harbored guilt, believing their needs had somehow caused the family's housing crisis. "Is it because of my braces?" Tyler asked one night. "Or because I needed new school shoes?" Sarah was heartbroken to discover he'd been refusing school lunch, telling the cafeteria staff he wasn't hungry to save money. Mia confessed she'd been selling her clothing to classmates to contribute cash to the family budget. "Listen to me," Sarah told them firmly. "What happened to us was not because of anything you needed or wanted. It was because powerful people broke rules to take our home. Your only job is to be kids, to learn, play, and grow." As the Alliance prepared for court proceedings, Sarah received unexpected news from Diana Miller. The judge assigned to their case was Eleanor Martin, a recently retired housing court judge who had agreed to return for special assignment. "This is potentially significant," Diana explained during a strategy meeting. "Judge Martin has a reputation for thoroughness. She doesn't rush cases or rubber-stamp bank motions like some of her colleagues." Raymond seemed particularly pleased. "I appeared before her several times before my disbarment. She's tough but fair, expects absolute preparation but listens genuinely to evidence." Through Raymond's connection, Sarah arranged to meet Judge Martin informally before proceedings began. The retired judge agreed to coffee at a neutral location, a small bakery downtown. Judge Martin proved to be a formidable presence despite her diminutive stature. In her 70s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses, she listened attentively as Sarah explained her personal journey from foreclosure victim to Alliance organizer. "I'm not here to discuss your specific case," Judge Martin clarified. "That would be inappropriate. But I'm always interested in understanding how citizens navigate our complex legal system." Sarah nodded. "I understand. I'm not seeking preferential treatment, just guidance on how to be effective in court as someone without legal training." "First lesson, judges are human beings, not legal algorithms," Martin began, stirring her coffee. "We apply the law as written, but we appreciate parties who respect the court's time by being organized and precise." Over the next hour, Judge Martin shared insights about courtroom procedure and effective presentation of evidence. She explained technical terms Sarah had struggled with in legal documents. Most importantly, she validated the emotional challenge of facing powerful adversaries. "The courthouse can be intimidating by design," she admitted. "The architecture, procedures, and language all create distance between ordinary citizens and the legal process." Recognizing that reality isn't weakness, it's awareness. As they prepared to leave, Judge Martin made one final observation. "Ms. Connors, throughout our conversation, you've demonstrated remarkable resilience, but I've also noticed signs of what professionals might call acute stress response. Slight flinching at sudden noises, hypervigilance regarding exits." Sarah tensed, unsure how to respond. "I'm not criticizing," Martin continued gently. "I've seen it countless times in housing court. Losing one's home is profoundly traumatic. Consider that your legal battle may require emotional healing alongside legal strategy." The judge's insight proved valuable as Sarah continued experiencing flashbacks and anxiety attacks during case preparation. Rather than ignoring these responses, she began working with the Alliance's volunteer therapist to develop coping mechanisms. Meanwhile, Meridian Bank accelerated foreclosure proceedings against remaining homeowners in Oak Ridge Estates. 6 more families joined the Alliance after receiving foreclosure notices with suspiciously short redemption periods. "They're rushing to complete the neighborhood acquisition before our case proceeds," Raymond theorized, creating facts on the ground that would be harder to reverse. Diana Miller responded by filing for an emergency injunction to halt all foreclosures in the neighborhood pending the outcome of their case. Judge Martin granted a temporary stay, requiring Meridian to pause proceedings for 30 days while she reviewed evidence. This small victory energized the Alliance but enraged Meridian Bank. Their response came swiftly and personally. Sarah was working her pharmacy shift when her phone rang with her mother's number. "Sarah, you need to come quickly." Her mother's voice was tight with restraint. "Tyler's in the emergency room. His asthma. It's bad this time." Sarah rushed to Memorial Hospital, the same hospital that had placed her on leave, to find Tyler in respiratory distress, receiving nebulizer treatments and oxygen. The attending physician was Dr. Chen, a colleague she'd worked with for years. "Environmental trigger, most likely," he explained professionally, though his eyes conveyed personal concern. "His lung function is significantly compromised. We need to admit him overnight for monitoring and intensive treatment." Sarah nodded numbly, signing admission papers while watching Tyler's labored breathing. Mia sat beside her brother, uncharacteristically silent. her expression revealing the terror she normally kept hidden. Later that evening, when Tyler had stabilized enough to sleep, Sarah stepped into the hallway to call Raymond with an update. As she ended the call, she looked up to find Elizabeth Harmon approaching hesitantly. "Ms. Connors?" Elizabeth looked different from their previous encounter, slightly disheveled, lacking the polished appearance Sarah remembered. "I heard your son was admitted. Is he all right?" Sarah stiffened. "He's stable. Why are you here?" "I volunteer with the hospital auxiliary on Tuesdays." Elizabeth gestured to her pink volunteer badge. "When I saw your name on the patient family list, I wanted to see if there was anything you needed." The unexpected kindness from the wife of her adversary left Sarah momentarily speechless. "I know who you are, who you really are," Elizabeth continued quietly. "I've been following the news about the alliance, and I've been asking questions about Victor's business practices." Sarah studied the woman's face, searching for deception but finding only troubled sincerity. "Your son's condition," Elizabeth glanced toward Tyler's room. "It's related to your housing situation, isn't it?" "The motel?" "Environmental asthma," Sarah confirmed cautiously. "The doctor says he needs clean housing immediately." Elizabeth nodded, seemingly coming to a decision. "There's something you should know about the foreclosures. Victor has documents, planning applications filed with the city months before the first foreclosure notices were sent. They show the entire redevelopment was planned while people were still living in their homes. That would prove premeditation," Sarah realized, professional caution giving way to the significance of this information. "I can get copies," Elizabeth offered. "Victor keeps duplicates in his home office. Why would you help us?" Sarah asked, suspicious despite her hope. "He's your husband." Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly. "Because when I recognized you that day in the ER, I went home and asked Victor about your case specifically. He laughed and said you were collateral damage in a business transaction." She straightened, regaining her dignity. "I've spent 20 years believing my husband was simply a shrewd businessman, learning that his success comes at the expense of families like yours. I can't be complicit anymore." Sarah considered the offer carefully. "If you provide documents, the bank's attorneys will know where they came from. The consequences for you could be significant." "I understand." Elizabeth handed Sarah a business card with a personal number written on the back. "Call this number tomorrow. I'll have information for you." As Elizabeth walked away, Sarah felt a complicated mixture of hope and unease. An ally from within the Harmon household could provide crucial evidence, but at what personal cost to Elizabeth? And could she be trusted? When Sarah returned to Tyler's room, she found Mia awake, scrolling through messages on her phone. "Who was that lady?" Mia asked without looking up. "Someone who might be able to help us." Sarah sat beside her daughter. "How are you holding up?" Mia set down her phone, her expression serious beyond her years. "Do you ever wonder if this is worth it? Fighting the bank, I mean. Tyler's getting sicker, we're living in a gross motel, and you're working all the time." The question mirrored Sarah's own frequent doubts. "I wonder every day," she admitted. "Sometimes I think it would be easier to take their settlement offer and start over somewhere else. So why don't we?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Because some fights are about more than just us. If we walk away with our settlement, the bank keeps doing this to other families. Nothing changes except our personal situation." "But isn't that enough?" Mia persisted. "Isn't taking care of us your first job?" "Yes," Sarah acknowledged. "And if Tyler's condition worsens, or if things become truly unsustainable, I'll make that choice. But right now, we have an opportunity to be part of something important, something that might help many families beyond our own." Mia was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Garcia in history class says change only happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice, even when it's difficult." Mrs. Garcia sounds very wise. "She also says we should question authority and eat the rich," Mia added with a hint of her usual spirit. "But the principal doesn't like when she says that part." Sarah laughed softly, grateful for the moment of lightness amid their challenges. The following day, after Tyler was discharged with a new treatment regimen, Sarah called the number Elizabeth had provided. The conversation was brief and cryptic, resulting in arrangements to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital. Sarah arrived alone, having asked Raymond to watch the children. Elizabeth was already there, a manila envelope on the table before her. "These are copies," Elizabeth said without preamble, sliding the envelope across. "Permit applications, planning board submissions, and internal memos regarding the Oak Ridge project. They're dated 8 months before the first foreclosure notices were issued." Sarah opened the envelope cautiously, scanning the documents inside. They were exactly what Elizabeth had described. Detailed plans for the estates at Oak Ridge, on letterhead from both Harmon Development Group and Meridian Bank, with Victor's signature on multiple pages. Most damning was a memo outlining acquisition strategy for specific properties, categorizing homeowners by perceived vulnerability to financial pressure. Sarah's name appeared in a section labeled Phase 1 Targets, alongside notes about her single-parent status and variable income. "This is extraordinary," Sarah breathed. "How did you get these?" "I've had access to Victor's files for years. He never considered me interested enough in his business to be cautious." Elizabeth's smile held no warmth. His underestimation of women has always been his blind spot. "These documents could be decisive in our case." "I hope so." Elizabeth gathered her purse, preparing to leave. "Victor will know where they came from. I've made my peace with that." "Wait," Sarah caught her arm gently. "This will impact your marriage, your life." "Are you sure?" Elizabeth considered the question seriously. "My father was a Methodist minister. He always said integrity is choosing courage over comfort. I've chosen comfort for too long." After Elizabeth departed, Sarah immediately called Diana Miller, describing the documents without revealing their source. Diana arranged an emergency meeting for that evening to review the new evidence. The Alliance's legal team gathered in Diana's office, carefully examining Elizabeth's documents alongside their existing evidence. "This is the smoking gun we needed," Diana confirmed, excitement evident beneath her professional demeanor. "It establishes clear premeditation and coordination between the bank and development company before any legitimate foreclosure activities began." Raymond was studying the property targeting list. They categorized homeowners by vulnerability factors: single parents, medical debt, variable income, classic predatory selection. "Can we use these documents without revealing the source?" Sarah asked, concerned for Elizabeth's safety. "Eventually, they'll have a right to question how we obtained them," Diana acknowledged. "But by then, the documents will have served their purpose of pushing the court to grant full discovery, giving us access to the originals through proper legal channels." The team worked late into the night, incorporating the new evidence into their case strategy. Sarah called home periodically, checking on the children and assuring them she'd return soon. It was nearly midnight when Diana made an announcement that changed everything. "I've just heard from Judge Martin's clerk," she said, ending a phone call. "Based on our emergency filing with these new documents, she's granted our motion for expedited proceedings. The bank's motion to dismiss has been denied. We're going to trial, and soon." The news electrified the room. After months of preparation and setbacks, their case would finally be heard in court. The Alliance would have its day before Judge Martin, with substantial evidence supporting their claims. For Sarah, the moment brought both vindication and apprehension. A courtroom battle against Meridian Bank's resources would be daunting, even with Diana's expertise and their growing evidence. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Sarah noticed a small news alert on Diana's computer screen. "Harmon Development accelerates Oak Ridge project timeline." The battle was intensifying. Sarah could only hope their alliance was ready for what came next. The courthouse steps teemed with activity on the morning of April 15th. News vans with extended satellite dishes lined the street. Reporters clutched microphones and jostled for position. Signs bobbed above a crowd of supporters. Alliance members and community activists gathered to witness the beginning of proceedings. Sarah navigated through this unexpected spectacle, Diana Miller at her side providing a buffer from the shouted questions. Behind them followed Raymond and representatives from several Alliance families, all dressed in their most professional attire. A miscellany of borrowed suits, thrift store finds, and carefully pressed everyday clothes elevated by ties and costume jewelry. "Ms. Connors, how does it feel to take on Meridian Bank? Is it true you're living in a motel after your eviction? Do you expect to win against the bank's legal team?" Diana fielded questions with practiced ease, offering concise statements about justice and accountability while guiding their group toward the entrance. Inside, the marble-floored atrium provided momentary respite from the chaos. Sarah took a deep breath, adjusting the jacket of her navy pantsuit, the same one she'd worn to her foreclosure hearing nearly 7 months earlier. She'd had it professionally cleaned for today, a small expense that felt psychologically necessary. "Nervous?" Raymond asked, his own anxiety evident in his rapid blinking. "Terrified," Sarah admitted, "but ready." The courtroom itself was larger than she'd expected. Courtroom A, reserved for high-profile cases. Polished wood, imposing columns, and theatrical lighting created an atmosphere of ceremonial gravity. Already seated at the defense table was Meridian Bank's legal team, 5 attorneys in expensive suits, arrayed before laptops and organized binders. Their lead counsel, James Whitfield, was a nationally recognized banking defense attorney whose silver hair and tailored appearance projected authority. As Sarah took her seat at the plaintiff's table, she noticed Victor Harmon in the gallery, his expression unreadable. Elizabeth was nowhere to be seen. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the bailiff called for attention. "All rise. The Superior Court for the County of Westland is now in session." The Honorable Judge Eleanor Martin presiding. Judge Martin entered briskly, her robes flowing as she took her position on the bench. Her eyes scanned the courtroom before she nodded to the bailiff. "Be seated. Case number 2023 CV 4000. 729, Homeowners Justice Alliance versus Meridian Banking Corporation and Harmon Development Group. Are counsel ready to proceed? Diana Rose. Diana Miller for the plaintiffs, Your Honor. We're ready. James Whitfield for Meridian Bank, Your Honor. We're prepared. Jonathan Hayes for Harmon Development Group. Ready, Your Honor. Judge Martin reviewed documents before her. Before opening statements, I want to address preliminary matters. Mr. Whitfield, your motion to dismiss was denied last week based on new evidence submitted by plaintiffs. Do you wish to respond? Whitfield stood smoothly. Yes, Your Honor. We maintain that the plaintiff's evidence was improperly obtained and should be excluded. Furthermore, we question the standing of the so-called alliance as a unified plaintiff in this matter. Your concerns are noted. However, the evidence meets baseline authenticity requirements for this stage of proceedings. Judge Martin turned to Diana. Ms. Miller, regarding class certification for your alliance members, we've submitted affidavits from 35 affected households, Your Honor, all sharing common factual and legal issues regarding Meridian Bank's foreclosure practices in Oak Ridge Estates. Judge Martin nodded. I've reviewed those materials and am granting provisional class certification for purposes of this proceeding. We'll revisit final certification after evidentiary presentations. This preliminary victory caused a ripple of whispers among alliance members in the gallery. Sarah felt a momentary surge of optimism, quickly tempered by the knowledge that the real battle was just beginning. Counsel may proceed with opening statements. Ms. Miller. Diana approached the jury box confidently. Your Honor, this case is about more than technical violations of foreclosure procedures. It reveals a deliberate strategy to target vulnerable homeowners for financial gain. She outlined their core allegations succinctly, that Meridian Bank had coordinated with Harmon Development to identify, pressure, and ultimately remove specific homeowners from Oak Ridge Estates to facilitate an upscale development project. The foreclosures, she argued, were not responses to legitimate defaults but rather engineered acquisitions. The evidence will show that defendants classified homeowners by vulnerability factors, single parents, medical debt, inconsistent income, and then applied different standards when those homeowners experienced temporary financial difficulties. Those deemed desirable for retention received modification options. Those targeted for removal received accelerated foreclosure proceedings. Diana gestured toward the alliance members. These families lost more than houses. They lost homes, communities, and stability. They suffered health consequences, employment disruptions, and educational setbacks, all because they stood in the way of corporate profit. When she finished, James Whitfield rose for the defense, his tone measured and reasonable. Your Honor, this case represents a fundamental misunderstanding of banking regulations and legitimate business practices. Meridian Bank adhered strictly to all applicable laws regarding mortgage servicing and foreclosure. He characterized the alliance as disappointed borrowers seeking to blame others for their financial irresponsibility. The foreclosures, he insisted, resulted from legitimate defaults after appropriate notice and opportunity to cure. As for the purported targeting of vulnerable homeowners, this is simply risk management. Lenders naturally evaluate borrowers' stability factors when determining modification eligibility. That's not discrimination, it's prudent banking. Regarding Harmon Development's involvement, Whitfield dismissed any impropriety. Developers routinely acquire properties from lending institutions. There is no requirement that banks refuse to sell foreclosed properties to specific buyers. His closing remarks aimed directly at Sarah. The plaintiff's lead representative, Ms. Connors, fell behind on her mortgage payments for 3 consecutive months after previous accommodations. The bank followed all required procedures before foreclosure. Her current hardship, while unfortunate, is not the bank's responsibility. The personal attack caught Sarah off guard. She felt her chest tighten as Whitfield returned to his seat, his colleagues nodding approvingly. Diana squeezed her arm reassuringly, a silent reminder to maintain composure. Judge Martin announced a brief recess before witness testimony would begin. In the hallway, alliance members gathered around Sarah, offering support and encouragement. Don't let them get to you, Maria Rodriguez urged. They want to make this personal to distract from what they did to all of us. Sarah nodded gratefully. I know. It's just hard hearing them twist everything. When proceedings resumed, Diana called her first witness, Dr. Jerome Wilson, a housing policy expert who had analyzed the pattern of foreclosures in Oak Ridge Estates. His testimony established the statistical improbability of the foreclosure concentration without deliberate targeting. Next came former Meridian employee Thomas Jenkins, who had worked in the loan modification department. He testified that certain Oak Ridge applications received special handling designations that effectively fast-tracked them to denial. We had internal codes for different properties, Jenkins explained. Properties coded DR for development ready were automatically routed for denial of modification, regardless of borrower qualifications. The defense attorneys objected repeatedly to this testimony, questioning Jenkins's access to such information and suggesting he was a disgruntled former employee with a personal vendetta. Judge Martin allowed the testimony but instructed the court to consider potential bias. Throughout the first day, Sarah observed the meticulous strategy behind Diana's presentation. Each witness built upon previous testimony, constructing a comprehensive narrative of systematic targeting and procedural manipulation. When court adjourned for the day, Sarah was exhausted but cautiously optimistic. Outside, reporters again swarmed their group, Diana fielding questions while Sarah and Raymond escorted Alliance members to their vehicles. "How do you think it went?" Sarah asked as they walked toward the parking structure. "Better than expected," Raymond replied. Jenkins' testimony about the coding system was particularly effective. You could see Judge Martin's interest peak there. "Whitfield seemed prepared for everything," Sarah observed, almost like he knew what our witnesses would say. Raymond frowned. "That's concerning. Let's mention it to Diana." That evening, Sarah returned to the motel to find her children and mother waiting anxiously for updates. Tyler's condition had stabilized with his new medication regimen, though the environmental triggers remained a constant concern. "Did you win?" Tyler asked immediately. Sarah smiled, ruffling his hair. "It doesn't work that quickly, buddy. This will take several days, maybe weeks." "But did we do good today?" he persisted. "Yes," Sarah assured him. "We did very good today." Mia, more perceptive to nuance, studied her mother's expression. "What's wrong? You seem worried." Sarah hesitated, then decided on honesty. "The bank's lawyers are very prepared, almost too prepared, like they might know what we're planning." "Like they have a spy?" Tyler asked, suddenly intrigued by the dramatic possibility. "No, nothing like that," Sarah quickly reassured him, though the thought had indeed crossed her mind. "Just very thorough research." After the children were asleep, Sarah reviewed her notes from the day's proceedings, identifying key points and potential vulnerabilities. Diana had warned that the defense would likely become more aggressive as the case progressed, particularly when presenting their own witnesses. This prediction proved accurate the following morning. The defense called their first witness, Alan Peterson, Meridian's regional foreclosure compliance officer. His testimony directly countered Jenkins's claims about coding systems, insisting all foreclosures followed standardized protocols regardless of property location. During cross-examination, Diana challenged Peterson with document timestamps, showing impossibly quick reviews of complex modification applications. "Mr. Peterson, are we to believe that your staff thoroughly evaluated Ms. Rodriguez's 60-page modification application in the 7 minutes between electronic receipt and denial generation?" Peterson's explanation about preliminary screenings sounded rehearsed and evasive. Judge Martin made several notations during this exchange, her expression thoughtful. The defense strategy became clearer with their second witness, financial analyst Rebecca Winters, who presented charts suggesting most foreclosed Alliance members had long histories of payment irregularities predating any development plans. These weren't stable homeowners suddenly targeted, Winters testified. They were chronically struggling borrowers who finally reached the threshold for foreclosure action. This testimony visibly affected Alliance members in the gallery. Sarah watched their expressions shift from indignation to uncertainty, exactly the reaction the defense wanted. These were proud people who had sometimes struggled financially. Having those struggles publicly characterized as irresponsibility cut deeply. During the lunch recess, Sarah approached Diana with concern. "They're making it sound like we deserve to lose our homes because we weren't perfect borrowers." "That's deliberate," Diana confirmed. "They're trying to shift focus from their procedures to your financial histories. Don't worry, we anticipated this. This afternoon, we'll redirect to the real issue, whether financial history justified the procedural disparities." The afternoon session brought the most difficult testimony yet. Victor Harmon himself took the stand, projecting calm confidence, as he described Harmon Development's relationship with Meridian Bank. "We maintain relationships with various financial institutions to identify potential development opportunities," he explained. "There's nothing improper about purchasing foreclosed properties through normal channels." When questioned about documents showing development plans predating foreclosures, Harmon appeared untroubled. "Of course, we create speculative plans for multiple neighborhoods. That's standard practice in development. Creating a plan doesn't mean we influenced foreclosure decisions." His testimony seemed designed to normalize what the Alliance viewed as predatory behavior. Worse, he was effective, articulate, reasonable, and never defensive. During cross-examination, Diana confronted him with the targeting memo Elizabeth had provided. "Mr. Harmon, this document from your office explicitly categorizes homeowners by vulnerability factors. It's dated 8 months before foreclosure notices were issued." Victor studied the document calmly. "I don't recall this specific memo," though it appears to be from our market research department. Analyzing demographic factors is standard practice when evaluating neighborhood investment potential. The memo specifically names Sarah Connors as a Phase 1 target due to her status as a single mother with variable income. How is that standard market research? Without context, I couldn't say, Victor replied smoothly. Perhaps Ms. Connors's property had strategic location value for initial development phases. His ability to reframe damning evidence as normal business practice was masterful. Sarah felt her confidence wavering as Victor left the stand, seemingly unscathed by what they'd considered their strongest evidence. He's good, she whispered to Diana. Yes, but he made one critical mistake, Diana replied. He claimed not to recognize a document that has his initials in the margin. Judge Martin noticed. I watched her make note of it. Day 3 brought Sarah herself to the witness stand. Despite preparation with Diana, her anxiety peaked as she was sworn in. This was the moment the case became deeply personal, her specific experience representing the broader pattern. Sarah described her history in Oak Ridge Estates, her mortgage payment record, and the circumstances leading to her default. She explained her attempts to secure modification after her ex-husband stopped child support payments, including bringing documentation to her court hearing. How did Meridian Bank respond to your modification requests? Diana asked. They said I didn't qualify because my income was too inconsistent, despite documentation showing sufficient average income, Sarah replied. When I asked about hardship programs, they said none were available for my situation. Yet you later learned other homeowners received different responses. Yes, Harold Jenkins, my former neighbor with lower income and worse payment history, received a special refinancing offer. The only significant difference between us was that I'm a single mother with children, while he's an older man living alone. The defense objection was immediate, speculation about the basis for lending decisions. Sustained, Judge Martin ruled. The witness should limit testimony to factual observations, not conclusions about motivations. Diana nodded, redirecting. Ms. Connors, please describe your eviction experience. Sarah recounted the rainy day, the deputies at her door, the children's confusion. Her voice remained steady, though the emotions were evident beneath her composure. What impacts has the foreclosure had on your family? We've been living in a motel for 7 months. My son has developed environmental asthma from the conditions there. My daughter had to change schools due to transportation issues. I lost my position at Memorial Hospital due to Meridian's complaint about my patient interactions. Could you explain that last point? Sarah described treating Elizabeth Harmon and the subsequent complaint alleging improper use of patient information. The timing suggested retaliation for my involvement with the alliance, she concluded. When James Whitfield rose for cross-examination, his approach was methodically personal. Connors, before your foreclosure, you were already experiencing financial difficulties, correct? I had managed my finances appropriately until my ex-husband stopped child support payments, Sarah clarified. Whitfield displayed exhibits showing late payments predating her ex-husband's default. These records indicate 5 late payments in the previous year. Would you characterize that as managing appropriately? Those payments were within the grace period. None were actually considered late by the bank's own definition. Let's discuss your employment. You've had how many jobs in the past year? I maintained my nursing position at Memorial while taking additional work to cover the income gap after child support ended. So, multiple jobs, irregular hours, inconsistent income, precisely the factors that make loan modification risky for lenders. Isn't it reasonable that Meridian considered these stability factors in their decision? Sarah felt the trap in his question. It would be reasonable if they applied the same standards to all borrowers. They didn't. Whitfield continued this line of questioning, attempting to characterize Sarah as financially unstable and therefore a legitimate foreclosure candidate. His approach was never overtly hostile, which made it more effective. He portrayed sympathy while systematically undermining her credibility. The most difficult moment came when he displayed photos of Sarah leaving various jobs: the hospital, the pharmacy, even Raymond's office. The images clearly resulted from surveillance, their existence disturbing in itself. These photos demonstrate your fragmented work life during the period you sought modification, Whitfield suggested. From a lending perspective, this represents significant instability. Diana objected. These surveillance photos are prejudicial and invasive. The photos merely document public activities relevant to the plaintiff's financial stability claims, Whitfield countered. Judge Martin studied the photos with evident distaste. I'll allow limited questioning about employment patterns, but the surveillance aspect of these exhibits concerns me. Proceed carefully, counsel. By the time cross-examination concluded, Sarah felt emotionally drained but not defeated. She had maintained her composure, and refused to accept Whitfield's characterizations of her financial decisions. The courtroom dynamic shifted dramatically the following morning when Diana called an unexpected witness, Elizabeth Harmon. Victor visibly tensed as his wife was sworn in, his whispered conference with his attorney indicating this development was unanticipated. Elizabeth's testimony began with establishing her relationship to the case, both as Victor's wife and as Sarah's former patient. She then described discovering documents in Victor's home office detailing the Oak Ridge acquisition strategy. The planning materials made it clear that specific homeowners were being targeted based on vulnerability factors, single parenthood, medical debt, inconsistent income, she explained. Properties were classified by acquisition priority, with explicit strategies for accelerating foreclosures on priority parcels. "Why are you testifying today, Mrs. Harmon?" Diana asked. Elizabeth glanced briefly at Victor before answering. "Because what happened to these families was deliberate and wrong. My financial security has been built on the displacement of vulnerable people. I can't remain silent anymore." During cross-examination, defense attorneys attempted to portray Elizabeth as a vindictive spouse acting from marital grievances. She remained poised, acknowledging that learning about these practices had indeed created tension in her marriage, but insisting her testimony was motivated by ethical concerns rather than personal animosity. "Harmon, did you remove confidential business documents from your husband's office without permission?" Whitfield asked. "I copied documents I had legitimate access to as a household member," Elizabeth replied. "Documents that revealed potentially illegal activities affecting dozens of families." Her testimony concluded with a devastating revelation. Victor had specifically discussed Sarah's case, describing her as collateral damage in a business transaction. As Elizabeth left the witness stand, Victor refused to meet her eyes. The gallery buzzed with whispered commentary until Judge Martin called for order. The defense team appeared visibly rattled by Elizabeth's testimony. Their subsequent witnesses seemed less confident, their answers more carefully measured. The narrative they had constructed, of legitimate business practices and appropriate foreclosure procedures, had been undermined by insider testimony. During final witness presentations, Diana introduced evidence of robo-signing in Alliance members' foreclosure documents. Forensic document examiner Dr. Aisha Johnson identified multiple irregularities in signatures, notarizations, and date stamps. These inconsistencies suggest systematic procedural shortcuts, Dr. Johnson testified. In Ms. Connors's case specifically, the signature on her foreclosure affidavit differs significantly from her verified signatures on other mortgage documents. This testimony proved particularly effective with Judge Martin, who had previously handled robo-signing cases during the 2008 crisis. She asked several clarifying questions, displaying clear familiarity with the technical aspects of improper documentation. As evidence presentation concluded, both legal teams prepared for closing arguments. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Alliance members, community supporters, and media representatives packed the gallery. James Whitfield delivered the defense closing first, his argument focusing on legitimate business relationships and appropriate risk management. Meridian Bank acted within its legal rights to foreclose on properties with payment deficiencies, he maintained. The subsequent sale of those properties to Harmon Development followed standard market practices. The plaintiffs have presented theories and conjecture, but no definitive evidence of improper coordination or targeted discrimination. He addressed Elizabeth Harmon's testimony directly. Mrs. Harmon's personal interpretations of business documents she admittedly took without authorization hardly constitute proof of systematic targeting. Her characterization of conversations with her husband represents hearsay colored by evident personal conflicts. Whitfield concluded by urging the court to recognize the dangerous precedent that would be set by ruling against the bank. If lenders cannot enforce mortgage contracts according to their terms, the entire housing finance system becomes unstable, ultimately reducing access to homeownership for all Americans. Diana Miller rose for the plaintiff's closing, her approach more narrative than technical. This case, at its core, is about the difference between following rules and following principles, she began. Meridian Bank wants the court to focus narrowly on whether they check the right boxes in their foreclosure procedures, but those procedures exist to protect fundamental principles: fairness, equal treatment, and good faith dealings. She methodically reviewed the evidence of disparate treatment, how similarly situated borrowers receive dramatically different responses to hardship situations based on whether their properties were targeted for acquisition. The documents we've presented show more than correlation. They show intention. Plans for these properties were created months before foreclosure notices were sent. Homeowners were classified by vulnerability factors. Internal codes determined which mortgage holders would receive assistance and which would receive acceleration notices. Diana walked slowly past the Alliance members seated in the gallery. gesturing toward them without theatrics. These families weren't just statistics in a business plan. They were people with lives, children, communities. When Sarah Connors stood before a judge last April, she wasn't just losing a house. She was losing her children's sense of security, their school connections, their belief in a system that treats people fairly. She returned to the central table, lifting the targeting document that Elizabeth Harmon had provided. This evidence shows that Meridian Bank and Harmon Development Group didn't just respond to market conditions. They engineered those conditions. They identified vulnerable homeowners, applied disparate standards, and processed foreclosures with documented irregularities to acquire specific properties for predetermined development plans. Diana concluded with a direct appeal to Judge Martin. Your Honor, we ask the court to recognize that these foreclosures resulted from a coordinated strategy targeting vulnerable homeowners, not legitimate default procedures. We ask for restoration of property rights where possible, and appropriate compensation where it's not. Most importantly, we ask for acknowledgement that what happened to these families was systemic and deliberate, not unfortunate but fair. Judge Martin announced she would review the evidence and issue a ruling within 2 weeks. As the court adjourned, Sarah felt suspended between hope and anxiety. They had presented their strongest case, but Meridian's resources and influence remained formidable. Outside the courthouse, Diana addressed the waiting media briefly. We believe we've presented compelling evidence of systematic targeting and procedural irregularities. The Alliance members have shown tremendous courage in challenging powerful interests, and we're hopeful the court will recognize the merit of their claims. Sarah stood beside her, overwhelmed by the cameras and questions. When asked how she felt, she responded simply, "Whatever the outcome, we've shown that ordinary people can stand up to powerful institutions when they work together." As she walked away from the media scrum, Sarah noticed Victor Harmon watching from the periphery. Their eyes met briefly, his expression unreadable, hers determined. The confrontation she had imagined never materialized. He simply turned and walked to a waiting car. The next 2 weeks passed in excruciating slowness. Sarah returned to her multiple jobs, the children to their routines. Alliance members met regularly, supporting each other through the waiting period and helping those facing immediate housing crises. On the morning Judge Martin's ruling was scheduled for release, Alliance members gathered at Raymond's print shop. The small space was crowded with anxious faces as Diana arrived with the court documents in hand. "I'll cut to the chase," she announced, scanning the first page. "We won, significantly." The room erupted in cheers and tears. Sarah felt lightheaded with relief as Diana continued reading key portions of the ruling. Judge Martin had found clear and convincing evidence of coordinated targeting of vulnerable homeowners. She determined that Meridian Bank had applied materially different standards to similarly situated borrowers based on their property's development potential. The documented irregularities in foreclosure procedures were deemed sufficient to invalidate many of the foreclosure actions. The remedies were substantial. Homeowners with invalid foreclosure documentation would have their property rights restored, with compensatory damages for displacement costs. Those whose homes had already been demolished would receive financial compensation based on fair market value plus damages. Meridian Bank was ordered to implement a supervised loan modification program for all affected homeowners who wished to remain in the neighborhood. Additionally, the court ordered the creation of a community oversight board to monitor Meridian's lending practices in historically disadvantaged neighborhoods for a 5-year period. "This is unprecedented," Raymond breathed, reading over Diana's shoulder. "The oversight provision alone is revolutionary." Diana tempered their celebration with practical considerations. "This is an important victory, but Meridian will almost certainly appeal. The implementation of these remedies could be delayed during that process." "How long could appeals take?" Sarah asked, already calculating how much longer they might need to remain in the motel. "Potentially a year or more," Diana admitted. "However, we can petition for immediate implementation of certain provisions based on hardship considerations." Despite this caveat, the Alliance members' joy was palpable. People who had lost hope of ever recovering their homes suddenly had tangible legal recognition of the wrongs they had suffered. That evening, as Sarah shared the news with her children, Mia asked the question that had been forming in Sarah's own mind. "So what happens now? Do we just go back to the house like nothing happened?" "It's not that simple," Sarah explained. "The bank will appeal, and even if we eventually get the house back, the neighborhood has changed. Some homes have already been demolished for the development." "But we won," Tyler insisted, confused by the lack of clear resolution. "We did win," Sarah confirmed, "but winning in court is just one step. Now comes the work of rebuilding, not just houses, but community." As they discussed possibilities, Sarah's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Elizabeth Harmon. "I've just heard about the ruling," Elizabeth said without preamble. "Victor is not taking it well. The development company is already preparing contingency plans to proceed with modified boundaries. They're still going ahead with development? Sarah was incredulous. Even after the ruling? Business adapts, Elizabeth replied, a note of resignation in her voice. But I'm not calling about that. I wanted you to know that your courage has inspired others. The bank's shareholders are asking uncomfortable questions. Victor has been called to testify before regulatory committees. After the call, Sarah sat quietly, processing this new information. The victory that had seemed so definitive hours earlier now revealed itself as just one battle in a longer campaign. That night, she wrote in the journal she had started when their legal fight began, "Today we won in court, but I'm realizing that justice isn't an event, it's a process. The system that allowed our homes to be taken still exists. The people who orchestrated it are still in positions of power. What changes isn't just ownership of buildings, but awareness of how vulnerable we all are to forces that prioritize profit over people. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but clear-eyed about the road ahead. Our neighborhood will never be exactly what it was. Some families have moved away permanently. Some homes are gone. But something new is possible now. Something we build together, with the knowledge we've gained about power, resistance, and community." 6 months after Judge Martin's ruling, Sarah stood on the sidewalk outside 1487 Maple Street, her former home, keys in hand. The appeal process continued, but Diana had successfully petitioned for immediate property restoration for families with demonstrated hardship, including Sarah's. The neighborhood looked markedly different from when she'd left. On the eastern blocks, construction equipment stood idle where homes had already been demolished before the court intervention. Several houses remained vacant, their owners having accepted settlements rather than returning. Others showed signs of recent occupation: fresh paint, new curtains, children's toys in yards. The house itself appeared mostly unchanged externally, though Sarah noticed new locks and a security system panel by the door. Inside, the emptiness emphasized how much they had lost beyond just the structure, furniture, decorations, the accumulated objects that make a house feel like home. "It's smaller than I remembered," Mia observed, her footsteps echoing in the vacant living room. "Mom, my growth marks are still here," Tyler called excitedly from the kitchen doorway, where pencil lines tracked his height over years. Sarah ran her fingers over these precious marks, grateful they hadn't been painted over during the bank's possession. Some things, at least, had endured. Moving back involved starting over in many ways. Sarah had sold most of their furniture during the eviction crisis. What remained had been damaged in storage or lost entirely. The Alliance organized a furniture drive, members sharing surplus items and helping each other settle back into their homes. The most significant changes weren't physical but emotional. Tyler still experienced nightmares about losing everything again, installing elaborate door barricades from his Legos each night. Mia remained skeptical about their stability, refusing to fully unpack certain treasured possessions, just in case. Sarah herself struggled with lingering anxiety. She installed multiple locks, kept important documents in a go-bag by the door, and startled at official-looking vehicles driving slowly past the house. The trauma of displacement had created vigilance that wouldn't easily fade. Professionally, Sarah's situation had improved. The hospital's investigation had concluded without finding impropriety, allowing her to return to nursing with back pay. Her supervisors, recognizing the public support she had gained through the case, treated her with new deference. The Alliance had evolved from a legal collective into a community advocacy organization. Weekly meetings continued at First Presbyterian, now focusing on neighborhood revitalization, financial literacy, and policy reform. Sarah remained heavily involved, balancing this work with her nursing career and family responsibilities. News about Meridian Bank and Harmon Development arrived periodically. Victor Harmon had avoided criminal charges through plea agreements, but faced civil penalties and professional disciplinary proceedings. The bank had replaced several executives and implemented new compliance protocols, though Alliance members remained skeptical about substantive cultural change. One unseasonably warm October evening, Judge Eleanor Martin visited Sarah's home for a small gathering of key Alliance members. Now fully retired from the bench, Martin had become an informal advisor to the group, helping translate their experiences into policy recommendations. "The neighborhood looks better than I expected," Judge Martin commented, accepting a cup of tea in Sarah's gradually refurnishing living room. "How many families have returned so far?" 17 out of the original 35, Sarah replied. Some took settlements, others relocated permanently during the legal process, but were rebuilding gradually. Raymond, seated nearby, added, "The Community Land Trust is our most exciting development. We've secured funding to purchase 5 foreclosed properties that owners didn't want to reclaim. They'll be permanently affordable housing, protected from future development schemes." Judge Martin nodded approvingly. "That's the kind of structural solution needed. One court victory doesn't change the system that made this possible in the first place. Sarah had been thinking along similar lines. The victory felt both significant and insufficient. They had reclaimed their homes but not transformed the conditions that had made them vulnerable. "I've been considering law school," she said, surprising herself by voicing the idea that had been forming for months. "Evening programs, part-time while continuing nursing." The judge set down her teacup. "That's an excellent path. Your experience would bring valuable perspective to legal practice." "It's probably impractical," Sarah backpedaled slightly. "With the children, work, everything else. Justice doesn't arrive through practicality," Martin observed. "It comes through persistence, often at personal cost. But you've already demonstrated that capacity." After the guests departed, Sarah helped the children prepare for bed in their restored rooms. Tyler had arranged his dinosaurs in protective formation around his bed, a ritual that seemed to comfort him. Mia was organizing her school supplies with characteristic precision. "Mom?" Tyler asked as Sarah tucked him in. "Are we really staying here forever now?" The question carried the weight of their months of uncertainty. Sarah chose her words carefully. "This is our home. We fought hard to get it back, and we'll do everything possible to keep it. But I've learned that forever isn't something anyone can promise about houses or jobs or even some relationships." Seeing his worried expression, she continued, "What I can promise is that whatever happens, we stay together. Home isn't just walls and a roof, it's us, taking care of each other." This seemed to satisfy him. "Like the dinosaur families in my book, they migrated together when their valley dried up." "Exactly like that," Sarah smiled. "Dinosaur families know what's important." In Mia's room, the conversation took a different tone. At 14, Mia had absorbed more of the complex realities behind their situation. "I heard you talking about law school," she said, arranging books on her newly assembled shelf. "Are you really going to do it?" "I'm thinking about it," Sarah admitted. "It would be challenging with everything else, but maybe worthwhile in the long run." Mia considered this, then pulled out a folder from her desk. "I've been researching scholarships for kids whose families experienced foreclosure. There are foundations that specifically help with college for students impacted by housing crises." Sarah examined the meticulous notes, once again struck by her daughter's resilience and foresight. "You're thinking about college already?" "After everything that happened, I realized education is something they can't take away from you." Mia shrugged, attempting teenage nonchalance despite the profound insight. "Besides, maybe I'll be a lawyer too. Someone has to keep fighting banks when you're old." That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah walked through her reclaimed home, noting both what had been restored and what remained irretrievably changed. The physical space was returning to functionality, but their sense of security had been fundamentally altered. Perhaps that wasn't entirely negative. Their previous security had been partly illusion, a belief in systems that would protect them, in fairness that would prevail without intervention. Now they understood the necessity of vigilance, community organization, and self-advocacy. Outside, the neighborhood reflected this duality. Half the street remained as it had been, modest family homes with established gardens and familiar porches. The other half showed the unmistakable impact of Harmon Development's partial victory: construction fencing, cleared lots, and signs announcing future home of Oak Ridge luxury townhomes. The development had been scaled back but not defeated. The market forces that had targeted their neighborhood continued to operate, merely redirected rather than transformed. 2 weeks later, Sarah attended a zoning commission meeting where proposals for the remaining development were being reviewed. The room was filled with competing interests: alliance members, development representatives, and new voices from affordable housing advocates who had joined their cause. Sarah presented testimony about the impact of partial development on the neighborhood's character and stability. She wasn't opposing all construction, she explained, but advocating for integration rather than displacement, mixed-income development that expanded housing options without eliminating existing communities. "The question isn't whether neighborhoods change," she concluded. "It's whether that change happens through extraction and exclusion, or through inclusion and improvement that benefits both existing and new residents." As she returned to her seat, Sarah noticed Elizabeth Harmon in the audience. They hadn't spoken since Elizabeth's testimony months earlier. After the meeting, they found themselves walking to the parking area together. "That was a compelling presentation," Elizabeth offered. The commissioners seemed receptive. "We're learning how to work within the system," Sarah acknowledged, "though sometimes I wonder if the system itself needs more fundamental change." Elizabeth nodded thoughtfully. "Victor and I are separated now. The case. It forced me to recognize things I'd been ignoring for years." "I'm sorry," Sarah said genuinely. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't your doing," Elizabeth replied. "If anything, you helped me see more clearly. Standing up for what's right has costs, but not standing up costs even more in the long run." They parted with awkward cordiality, neither friends nor enemies, but people whose lives had become unexpectedly intertwined through circumstances neither had anticipated. As autumn progressed toward winter, the Alliance celebrated small victories. The Zoning Commission approved a modified development plan requiring affordable housing components. The Community Land Trust secured additional properties. Several vacant homes were renovated for new families, chosen through a lottery system that prioritized those displaced from other neighborhoods. Sarah continued nursing while completing prerequisites for law school admission. Her mother helped with childcare, and Alliance members organized study groups where parents could prepare for educational advancement while children received homework help. By December, Sarah's home had been fully refurnished through a combination of donations, thrift shopping, and carefully budgeted new purchases. The children had readjusted to their schools, though both remained more solemn than before their displacement. On a snowy evening near Christmas, their doorbell rang unexpectedly. Sarah opened it to find Maria Rodriguez and several other Alliance members carrying food, decorations, and small gifts. "Surprise housewarming," Maria explained, leading the group inside. "We realized no one properly celebrated your return." The impromptu gathering filled the house with laughter and conversation. Children played in the living room while adults shared updates and plans. The atmosphere wasn't carefree, too much had happened for that, but carried the warmth of shared resilience. As Sarah looked around at these people who had become an extended family through hardship, she reflected on how differently community now figured in her understanding of home. Before the foreclosure, they had been neighbors who exchanged occasional pleasantries. Now they were allies who had witnessed each other's vulnerability and stood together against systemic forces. Late in the evening, as guests were preparing to leave, Raymond pulled Sarah aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a thick envelope. "It's your law school application, completed except for the personal statement. Diana and I took the liberty of gathering transcripts and reference letters." Sarah stared at the envelope in astonishment. "But the deadline is next week. You still have time to write your statement and submit." Raymond smiled at her expression. "We've all seen what you're capable of, Sarah. Now the admissions committee should see it too." After everyone had gone, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she had first reviewed her foreclosure papers, and opened her laptop. The application personal statement prompt asked about experiences that had shaped her understanding of justice and her motivation for legal education. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, the words flowing naturally after months of living this story. "My journey to law school began the day I lost my home. As a nurse and single mother, I had always believed that working hard and following rules would ensure security for my family. When that security was shattered through systematic foreclosure targeting, I confronted how legal structures can either protect or exploit vulnerable communities. Through organizing with other displaced families, I discovered that justice rarely arrives without collective demand. Legal knowledge became our most powerful tool, distinguishing predatory practices from legitimate processes, identifying procedural violations, and ultimately reclaiming our homes through court intervention. I seek legal education not to leave nursing behind, but to bridge these complementary forms of care. Both professions address human vulnerability, one treating physical suffering, the other addressing structural conditions that create preventable harm. My experience navigating both systems has shown me how legal knowledge can transform individual hardship into collective empowerment." Sarah continued writing late into the night, articulating the insights gained through her journey from displacement to advocacy. When she finally finished, the document represented more than an application. It was a declaration of her transformed understanding of justice and her role in pursuing it. Before closing her laptop, Sarah checked on her sleeping children. Tyler had abandoned his protective dinosaur formation, a small sign of growing security. Mia's desk showed evidence of her own application research, brochures for summer pre-law programs for high school students. Back in her room, Sarah opened her bedside drawer and removed the key to their house. Not the new key from the restoration, but the original she had kept throughout their displacement. She placed it in a small box alongside other mementos of their journey. Newspaper clippings about the case, the Alliance's first meeting agenda, a photograph of members on the courthouse steps. These objects represented a chapter that had changed them permanently. Their home was restored, but they would never again take it for granted. Their community was rebuilding, but with heightened awareness of its vulnerability. Their understanding of justice had evolved from abstract principle to daily practice. As Sarah prepared for sleep, she reflected on Judge Martin's words. Justice isn't an event, it's a constant vigil. The victory they had achieved wasn't an ending but a beginning, the start of ongoing work to create more just systems and more inclusive communities. Outside her window, snow continued falling, covering both the restored homes and construction sites in temporary uniformity. By morning, the distinctions would reappear, the neighborhood's divided landscape again visible. But tonight, Sarah took comfort in the momentary peace, the quiet opportunity to rest, before returning to the vigilant work of justice. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know experienced housing insecurity? What community resources made a difference? What systemic changes do you believe are needed to prevent predatory practices in housing? Subscribe for more stories that examine social justice issues through personal narratives.